as I said, I want the interview to be like a casual one.
Sure.
But still, I would try to conduct it in chronological order of your work. So we can start from takeout first. I realize a lot of your works, focus on like marginalized people of certain communities, communities that we're not really aware of, like, Chinatown in New York, or like in Tangerine is LA, but, it's a very, it's not the kind of LA that you would, associate with. And also Prince of Broadway, it's Broadway, but it's not related to the theaters in Broadway. It's related to these, like, places, how would you call it, places selling these, like,
the counterfeit goods.
So I wonder, how do you have, get into making films of these marginalized peoples and all these like communities? How did you start with this? Such interest.
To tell you the truth, Takeout was originally supposed to be a film that was when the Dogma 95 movement sort of made it something that was acceptable. You could actually shoot on standard definition mini DV, and it would be accepted by your audiences and your critics. We thought we were just going to make a film that actually was a look at New York City. That was the first and foremost thing, and like shoot like as if from the eyes of an outsider, focusing on all of these different lives, giving glimpses into people's apartments for 30 seconds while he's making a delivery. That was originally supposed to be the movie. It was supposed to be just like 30-second moments of people's lives. And then but to set out to do it right, Xi Ching and I we were actually living above a Chinese restaurant at the time, and the men that were making the deliveries, they were right there. So we started asking them about their lives and stories, and we realized that there was a lot more than just that could be focused on. A lot of the men were undocumented. They were smuggled here, and we started exploring that topic, and there was a lot to learn. So I started exploring that, and that became the number one. That became the subject matter. The subject matter was a look at an undocumented immigrant who's dealing with a smuggling debt and how he stays under the radar.
That was the opening scene, wasn't it?
Whole, and then we were actually starting to work with people from the Fujian province, and realizing that most of the men and even the women that we were working with at that local Chinese restaurant up on the Upper West Side, their lives were very similar to the life of the character in the movie. So they were informing us a lot, and this is something that I guess it was my introduction to this world. But Prince of Broadway was, the way we went about that was a very different process. Maybe Takeout sparked that interest in me, semi-subconscious level. I wanted, again, look at New York City, and I chose this area that was extremely vibrant. Like, it's been gentrified now. Like, now there's an Ace Hotel there.
I've never been to New York, but I can tell.
It's no longer there. Everybody moved from that area to Chinatown, down on Canal Street. And they used to work directly with the Lebanese, and now they work directly with the Chinese. And this I'm talking about the West African immigrants. So we didn't know anything about this world, so my partner and I, her name is Victoria Tate. She worked with me on Prince of Broadway. She was actually in that film. We spent like a year trying to interview as many men as possible, and that was so informative because, for me, I was introduced to a whole world I didn't know that was very much invisible. Undocumented immigrants who are struggling just to stay by underneath the radar. Some were living in the U.S. for over 10 years, paying taxes. And there was something that struck me as, I think we all like underdogs in our movies. We all like, the struggle of the person who seems like they have to battle against the system. They have to battle against the mainstream in order to then, succeed in the end. And I think that both of my characters from both Takeout and Prince of Broadway were very much like the underdogs, the ones struggling just to get, just to get by.
They're both foreigners.
Yeah. And then I think that even though I didn't tackle that same subject matter with Starlet, I think that there was something about, again, just about somebody from the outside. But most of the people in the adult film industry are not from there. They're from other places. They come there because for economic reasons. It's always economic reasons. It's not like, I think the fantasy is that, like, women want to work in the adult film world because they love sex. But that is so not the truth. It's always monetary. At that point, I realized that it had a lot to do with my fascination also with the underground economy and like people living and getting by with this parallel economy that's worth, billions of dollars. And I think that was where I started to see something like my own fascination of this, especially in the U.S., in which we're so, I would say, so proud of our capitalism, Donald Trump. And so it's always interesting to me that, like, but the mainstream capitalist system it's still supported by this underground capitalist system. So anyway, I don't know if at first my approach was about it was never about trying to find marginalized people or underrepresented people, but perhaps it was it was stuff I wasn't seeing enough of, and I already did. My first film was was my look at white suburbia.
Are they universities?
Yeah, like first year. A lot of the dialogue was based on stuff I had overheard or heard from friends. And so I got that out of my system. And then I was trying to find stories that would actually educate me and expand my social circles. And that was very interesting because throughout all of these films, I've become friends with the people that I'm focusing on. And it actually, it's almost like travel, the way that travel kills, prejudice and bias. I think that, if you do it, in a way, I was, through my work, through this art, I was forcing myself to be able to converse and try to comprehend and have empathy for people outside of those social circles that we're stuck with. And I think that became eventually the goal, especially when the journalists and interviewers started pointing this out, that there were these parallels through my films. Then I became more aware of it at around Tangerine was when I became the most aware of it. But still, Tangerine was a desperate move just to make a movie, and so the only thing that was on my mind about Tangerine was, of course, the representation, and then bringing something to the screen that was very, very different from what anybody else had seen. Like, I wanted the audiences to be like, this is existing in Hollywood, and we didn't even know this. Yes, it's right, like half a mile from where I live, So I hope I answered your question. I don't know.
I realize, most of your films center on friendship rather than a courtship, or a relationship. So I mean, unlike most of the Hollywood films, or even like indie Hollywood film,
I think that because friendship is such a universal thing. We all have our best friends in the world, hopefully, and we can all rely on them, hopefully. And we all hope we can rely on them. There's always, when you think of what you want your best friend to be, you don't really often analyze that. You often go like, when I look at my partner that I'm going to marry or be with for the rest of my life, I'm looking for this quality, and this quality. But you never talk about your best friend having this quality and this quality and this quality. The reason that you're best friends is because something brought you together in terms of, common interests, or maybe just who knows what leads to people being friends. But and I think that that's just something that is so universal that it actually is That's why there were so many buddy cop movies, if you think about it. Throughout the history of, cinema and just storytelling in general, friendship is a big thing. Even the song, Beat the Beatles, it'll help from my friends. It's like, it means obviously something to us. We have to, it's hard to get by alone in this world. It drives people mad to be alone. And I think that, having companionship in terms of, on a friendship level is something that it's almost vital for the human soul, and so that's why stories about it make us feel good, especially when friendships work. When friendships break apart, it's those films are hard to watch. Those films are hard to watch, but when it's actually very satisfying for audiences when like a friend supports one another or the other, or like there is that moment of support from somebody who isn't somebody in a loving relationship. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Sorry.